The biggest takeaways from Thursday's games. Next on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers, here with Adam Azer to break down the Thanksgiving slate of games. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Adam, and to everyone listening. And we'll do one big question from each game, starting with the Bills' win over the Lions, where Josh Allen probably struggled a little bit more than his, I think it was 33 fantasy points might make you think. That's a very good game. And he's the kind of fantasy player who can do that even when he's not playing well. But he's been a little rusty. I think it's 6 red zone interceptions in his last 4 games. That elbow injury seems to be a real concern with his accuracy, especially on short and intermediate throws. He's still dropping dimes like that beautiful throw to Stephon Diggs on the final drive to help win the game. But what is your level of concern with Josh Allen as the fantasy playoffs loom?
It's about a 2 or a 3. He scored 12, by my count, right around 12 fantasy points on the final 2 possessions of the game. That was a touchdown in the field goal drive and a lot of rushing on those 2 possessions as well. The rushing totals are always going to help him. I can't really see him having a lot of games under 20 fantasy points. Even when he's bad, he's scoring more than 20 fantasy points. But I do have some concerns because, as you said, you have to have watched the game to have seen and to have heard on the broadcast all the talk about it. Yeah, the inaccuracy, the unusually bad throws from Josh Allen. So there's something there. It's hard to really quantify. It's hard to do anything about it. But, I mean, who's better than him rest of season? I would say definitely Mahomes. Then after that, you could definitely go with – there's some debate after that. I mean, he could be number 2. I don't know. But
yeah, the problem is Jalen Hurts – struggling a little bit. Lamar Jackson struggling a lot. Justin Herbert still hasn't looked like himself. So not a lot of options. Certainly not anyone that you would be likely to sit Josh Allen for, especially with Justin Fields dealing with this shoulder injury. But yeah, I agree. He's still clearly a must start. My only concern, I guess, would be just that what if this injury gets worse? I hope it doesn't, but the Bills obviously have long-term aspirations with not just this year, but in the long run. And, if there's a situation where it gets a little worse, he has to miss a game, that would be the biggest concern I have. But, when you have a bad game and you finish with 33 fantasy points, you're a pretty good player. Let's move on to the Giants losing to the Cowboys in the second game of the day. And
you had to say it like that. You had to phrase it like that.
The Cowboys beat the Giants.
There you go. Let's do that.
Which, not a surprise, but what is a surprise is Saquon Barkley looking like he's slowing down. Had 52 yards in this one. That's the 3rd time in his past 4 games with fewer than 65 yards. He did find the end zone in this one, which helps, but he hasn't been quite as explosive of late. He hasn't looked quite the same. I don't think he hasn't really had any injuries of late, so it's not like we can point to anything there, but especially in the passing game, he has 13 or fewer yards in each of his past 4 games. What's your level of concern with Saquon Barkley as a, let's say top 6 fantasy running back the rest of the way?
I think he's still going to be close to that, somewhere between 6 and 12. My level of concern would be about a 4. Because look, if Daniel Jones, I thought played okay, but that one throw on that 4th down was a bad throw, and that could have been a touchdown. If you watched, I mean, he had so much daylight ahead of him, so Barkley could have had a 5th catch for something like 60 yards and a touchdown. We wouldn't be talking about this. But no, I mean, there is definitely some concern with their offensive line as injured as it is. I think he'll be fine. I'm guessing this is just a little bit of a slump. Derrick Henry had a little bit of a slump earlier in the year. Barkley still has such big playability. I trust the Giants coaches to scheme him up and get him some plays in space. I think he'll be fine, but he was never really a consideration for RB1 for me even when he was playing well. Just doesn't have the upside that some of the truly elite ones have, but I do think he'll be, maybe something like RB8 to 10 to 12, somewhere in that range rest of season.
All right, and then we'll move on to the final game of the night where the Vikings beat the Patriots, and this was a surprising one. Damian Harris actually got the start for the Patriots. It doesn't really matter all that much. Ramondre Stevenson was still playing more snaps in the first half. Damian Harris did leave the game with a thigh injury, but they were splitting work pretty evenly. I think it was 3 carries for each of them in the first half. Ramondre Stevenson did have 4 targets, 3 catches, I think, for 9 yards. Any concerns here about Ramondre Stevenson's workload? I mean, I thought he's a top 12 running back moving forward, but do you think he's in that range still?
No, I only said no because Harris left with the injury.
Yeah.
He has been a stalwart in the passing game. So that's never going to be Harris's role.
Fourth among all running backs in target share this season, Ramondre Stevenson.
Oh, that's amazing. And it feels like it's just getting better. He had 9 catches in this game. But yeah, I think the difference between Ramondre Stevenson being something like RB10 and something like potentially RB2, 3, that good, is Damian Harris. So I wouldn't say there are any concerns, but I would say that if Harris misses time, and that thigh injury did not look good. If he misses time, that is potentially RB1 every week in full PPR.
Yeah, I agree. He's got that kind of upside the way they're using him. And then a quick update after we talk about those games on the Chargers-Cardinals game, which probably has the biggest and most numerous injury concerns heading into the weekend. No practice on Thursday for Mike Williams, Greg Dortch, or Rondale Moore. Kyler Murray did practice for the second day in a row. He's on pace to play. What are you expecting from Kyler in this one? If no, Greg Dortch and Rondale Moore, especially.
I have pretty high expectations, actually. I think this could be a shootout. And, the Chargers defense is fine, but I'm not really concerned about the matchup so much. As long as he has DeAndre Hopkins, I think he's going to be fine. And he could have Marquise Brown, obviously. So I think he's a must-start player. I was a little worried about him last week against the 49ers, potentially not fully healthy. I feel like he's, pretty close to that. I hope anyway. Well, we won't know until the game starts, but I think my concerns about Kyler Murray are pretty minimal, and he's a must-start player.
Yeah, he's a top 8-ish quarterback for me this week. Marquise Brown coming back would certainly help. And you said the Chargers defense is fine. They're 29th in scoring defense. So that's the second year in a row that they've ranked that poorly. Obviously, I think the talent is better than that. But yet again, they're disappointing, which seems to be a perennial thing with the Chargers. So, they could turn things around, but right now it doesn't look like a particularly tough matchup. So, yeah, as long as Kyler Murray's healthy and, they gave him seemingly an extra week to get there. So hopefully his rushing is going to be fine. I think he's going to be just fine for fantasy. And that's going to do it for FFT and 5. We'll talk to you tomorrow. See ya.